It is the August 27th edition of the PFF Forecast. We've got PFF's very own Kevin Cole coming on. We're going to talk about his new podcast, which is starting up this week. It's awesome. We talk about some bold predictions, and then we get out of here. So let's rock. I don't think this needs a huge intro, but Kevin Cole is a guy that behind the scenes at PFF has just been doing some awesome stuff, and I'm happy he's having a podcast.
Yeah, he's very instrumental in our fantasy projections.
Yep.
Fantasy expected points was something he took on after we made some changes this year, and I think one of the awesome thing. I mean, he's so good on camera. He articulates his ideas very well. So it'll be fun to talk to him.
It'll be good. So we've got Kevin Cole, and then next week, I'll tell you about that after the interview. Here's Kevin Cole. All right, this is going to be fun. Kevin Cole is joining us now from a new location. You've had a big summer. You were was it the backwoods of Pennsylvania, and now you are a member of, is it Maryland technically?
Terrapin Nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right down the road from there, actually. So yeah.
Most people have had I've been at home all summer. You literally haven't been at home all summer until now.
Yeah, kids, New York City, everything came into play. I'm sure you'll hear all these reports about everyone's getting out in New York. And we got out far out of New York, even beyond the suburbs, all the way down here to the D.C. area, where I know that you spent most of your summer. So we didn't cross paths. We couldn't do any elbow bumps or long or distance walks or something. I don't know what the hell. I don't know what people are doing.
Distance hangouts.
Yeah. Look, we'll put a chair here, and then 10 feet away is your chair, and we'll each have a separate 6-pack of beers, and we'll do that. The more exciting news, I would say, is that finally, long time coming, podcast for Kevin Cole. Unexpected Points. You already have recorded one episode. It will be coming out maybe later, depending on when you're listening to this. It might actually already be out. So you should go check it out and subscribe. I do want you to explain, though, the name of the podcast, because we went back and forth on this, talking about it. And the first time you suggested it, I was like, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing was initially I wasn't sure if it rolled off the tongue that well, Unexpected Points. But I mean, it's a little bit of a wink to the analytics community. Expected points added being the primary number that most people have latched onto as being the analytically clearest and most well-defined value metric. So there's that, but the throwing the on the front of there is kind of talking about where there's a lot of typical football podcasts out there. A lot of them do great jobs. What I'm going to try to do is approach things from a little bit of a different angle. So maybe some things you wouldn't necessarily expect from your typical football interview podcast. So that's how it all comes together.
So explain the cadence of the podcast. It's going to be interviews once a week, right? Do you have a criteria that people have to meet to be on the interview list?
I mean, I think generally it's going to be people who I respect their work a lot. I think can have interesting conversations. Some of it will be people who have analytical focus.
Man.
But I don't want it to be just people that are, we're going to come on and we're just going to talk about analytics that, analytics of this, because there's a growing group of people. And in fact, one of the people that I reached out to about maybe even coming on next week, where I'm not necessarily going for the biggest followings, but there's a writer for USA Today, Stephen Ruiz. And the reason I like him a lot is because he brings stuff like expected points into his analysis, but he also has very much of a football guy type of understanding of the game. And I think it's those sorts of things that are the most interesting to talk about.
He also brought down the Culper Ring Sports, which I feel like was a
talk about inside references.
You're going to need to explain Culper Ring Sports, I think.
Well, when
the explanation will take longer than it
lasted. Well, somebody who we know built a Drew Brees. When Drew Brees' comments came out, he built a weirdly referenced Twitter handle where free minds can come talk about football. And of course, the backdrop to the Twitter was Drew Brees kneeling for the flag or something like that. And Stephen Ruiz found out who it was and got it shut down relatively quickly.
Yeah, we're not kneeling. Your first episode is with who?
It is with JJ Zacharyson. People may know him in the fantasy football community. Obviously, we're in fantasy season here.
Yes.
I think most fantasy drafts are going to either occur this weekend or maybe the following weekend, just because of everyone maybe a little bit behind the curve as far as getting up to speed on the analysis. So he's on there. He is the editor-in-chief at FanDuel. And again, he's one of these guys where I think if I was going to look at building the perfect fantasy football analyst, I would take Evan Silva and his knowledge of just everything, essentially, and player base, everything like that. And I would also look at JJ because he has, not only does he have that to a pretty high degree, but he has this more kind of macro view. I mean, what he's best known for, and his Twitter handle is Late Round Quarterback, is really popularizing with an ebook and really pushing the idea of how you could wait and draft quarterbacks later in drafts. And now that is really the industry standard. Any sort of expert draft that you're seeing, that's what people are doing. So it's probably changed the way people draft in fantasy football more than anything else, that any other contributions that we've seen.
I mean, well, look, unless you're a Gardner Minshew aficionado, did you see this thing where it's like, hey, if you draft me in the first round, you could get a free case of Bud Light, which made me question like the marketing strategy there, because what's a case of Bud Light? I haven't bought a case of Bud Light in a while, but what is it, $20? Have any of you bought
I don't even.
Bud Light?
I don't think I'll drink. Okay, here's a good question. I know both of you are not like beer drinkers, but humor me for a second here. What's the lowest beer you would buy yourself? Because Bud Light certainly is below that. I'll drink it if it's there and somebody is like, I'm trying to like get along.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to buy Bud. I would never purchase Bud Light with my own money.
Yeah, I'd rather buy sparkling water.
For men? Like
Yes.
Sampo?
I think Kevin and I are on the, I'll take a smart water.
Okay, what's the lowest alcohol that you would buy with your own money?
Lowest out. Now I'm going to sound like stop. Someone commented on that on the YouTube, by the way. They were like, George cares more about food and drinks than
I
sports.
saw that. Look, George, I think it's been, that one might sting a little, but the number of people calling you a snob has decreased over time.
True.
I think if you put it on a graph.
It actually made me feel good. Like
I thought that was part of the brand.
I hadn't lost my fastball. That's an important part of it.
You've become too much of a man of the people lately.
Exactly. I love JJ, by the way, and it's interesting that you brought up the late round quarterback thing, because I remember very vividly the first fantasy football draft I was in. I was 12, and it was a group of like very hardcore fantasy football guys. It was like a $200 buy-in, and it was a regular draft, but it was 2 quarterbacks. It wasn't just super flex. It was like 2 quarterbacks. So me being the rambunctious 12-year-old kid I was, did all this research on fantasy football, and of course every fantasy football article or ranking is all about having one quarterback. And so I remember going in this draft like, I've got to get running backs and receivers. So I end up not drafting a quarterback until like round 6. I get like Matt Hasselbeck as QB1. I've got LT, I've got Jamal Lewis, I've got Plexico Burress, like Hines Ward, and people are laughing at me. And I have no idea why until I look at the roster sheet again and I go, oh shit, I need to get 2 quarterbacks. So I end up with Mark Bolger, who at the time was a backup. And I'm like, listen, guys, I'm confident that Kurt Warner's not going to make it through this season.
You're saving face, basically.
Jamal Lewis starts for 2,000 yards. My team is unstoppable, but we've come a long way in the sense that not only is that something that's like industry standard, but also now there's so many different ways that you can play fantasy football too, right? Like it's not just I'm going to do 1 quarterback redraft leagues.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of different things out there. Actually, one of the biggest quote-unquote industry drafts in the offseason is a super flex league where you can start a second quarterback. And what you see there is even these so-called experts, they start going for quarterbacks very, very early. So I think some of the lessons that apply in your average standard 1 quarterback league, I always apply them there too, where I try to wait longer than others because there still really is the value. And if you look at the quarterback position this year, I would say it's almost as deep as it's ever been. Almost anyone beyond a few teams is pretty good. I mean, think about Gardner Minshew, for instance. I mean, he had a good rookie year, right? He had a pretty solid rookie year. It's just he was a low draft pick, and he's someone you could get near the very, very end. So there are just so many different options this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think especially now when you're almost better off doubling up and going with, like we talked about these guys yesterday on the show, but Wentz, Ryan, Stafford are kind of in a situation where you get two of those guys. Some people are, if you look at some of these best ball leagues, guys are going after Lamar right away, going after Mahomes right away, which is probably a negative EV strategy given, some of the things, like even Mahomes last year was awesome, won the Super Bowl, but wasn't a brilliant fantasy player on a week-for-week basis. And Lamar, there's just so much. Obviously, he's a league winner if he dominates, but I feel like he's also, you have no chance if you take him in round 2 or round 1.
Right.
And
he was a league winner last year.
Flames away, right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Michael Vick in 2010, and then people are taking Michael Vick in 2011 in the first round, myself, back in the day, noob. And, I had no shot because he got hurt a few times.
Here's an interesting question, because I know you're a Kyler guy, Kevin. And
Kai guys is what we're calling them.
Kai guys. I mean, I love Kyler Murray too, but it seems like people always chase what happened last year, right? So Lamar is a league winner last year, so everyone's like, okay, who's the mobile quarterback that's going to take the league by storm in year 2? It's like, oh, Kyler Murray, obviously. I mean, you can like a guy and obviously not like him as much as how high he's going. Are you falling into that category, or do you still like him more than the popular plebeian does?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to quarterback and even tight end, there's a pretty well-defined top tier, and Mahomes and Jackson being it for quarterback. And then once you start to get into that next tier, I think that's when it can be dangerous because you're passing up on really high-quality running backs, wide receivers, other positions that you need. And right now, Kyler is, depending upon where you look, he's either the 5th or the 6th quarterback being taken after, Dak Prescott's up there, Deshaun Watson's up there, Russell Wilson is up there, Josh Allen is in that sort of mix. Mm-hmm. So I think that tier where you're still going to have to draft one of these guys in the first 4 or 5 rounds, and if you're in a draft with your buddies, it may be even earlier than that. It's just too high of a price to pay for purely a projection at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you think – I mean, I view the Cardinals as like a 1 year too early team.
Yeah, much like
the Browns last year were one year too early.
Maybe. I mean, we're going to get into some bold predictions here in a second. I wonder if the Browns make it. So my question would be then, is there a guy at the quarterback position, and I'm asking this selfishly because I'm trying to be smart here, and maybe it's Gardner Minshew, where you're like, okay, this isn't Lamar Jackson, but he's going to be a deal and has a chance to really be awesome from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to pump up the analysis of what JJ had told me. So just a little backtrack. So we went over his 15 bold predictions, an article he does every year. Last year, one of his bold predictions was that Lamar Jackson would be a top 3 quarterback. Now, maybe thinking about it now, it doesn't seem that bold, but at the time he was something like the 18th, 19th, 20th quarterback to be drafted. So obviously it was a massive, massive hit. So I don't think it's an equivalent situation this year, but the quarterback that he's picking, and it's really leaning on a lot of the same philosophy with rushing yards, giving you upside, is Cam Newton, who right now is going, depending upon where you're looking at draft, somewhere around that quarterback 20 type of range this year.
I love it.
We talked about the Jaguars yesterday. I mean, they're a team where the early season schedule is not terrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're going to be underdogs, but not 14-point underdogs, not prohibitively bad early on. And I feel like he might be even like a trade candidate. If he plays outside of his mind in the first 4 or 5 weeks and the Jags are, let's say, 3-3, then you can possibly flip him to a team like in your league that's not as smart, right? And you could get a guy like – I didn't realize this last year. The Falcons were 6-2 in the second half last year.
Right.
If you got Matt Ryan halfway through the year.
Because it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah. You could sort of buy low at the middle part of the season after you've bought low in the draft on a guy like Minshew.
All right. So you did JJ's bold predictions. We're gonna piggyback off that, pogo stick off that one, and we're gonna do some bold predictions that might not be necessarily fantasy oriented, but they're bold nonetheless. Eric, do you want to start?
Sure.
Or I can start, because I have many, but I feel like yours are always going to make me think a little bit harder, and I think that I've already juiced all of the juice out of mine. So
Yeah. I have a bold my boldest prediction is I think Tennessee should be the favorite in the AFC South. Yeah.
What's interesting about that is I hear two sides to this. The first is, how can Deshaun Watson and the Texans not be the team? Deshaun Watson's amazing. And then the other side of it is like, are you crazy? Did you see what the Colts have done this offseason? And I go back and forth on that, but where I end up landing is I have so much more faith in Deshaun Watson than I do Phillip Rivers, even in a new situation. And so to me, that shines a light on the uncertainty of that whole division. So I guess if you have confidence in Ryan Tannehill, that's not ridiculous.
I mean, my thing is Indianapolis has a decent amount of stability, except for at the position where it matters most. There are tons of narratives out there that Phillip Rivers with that offensive line can be, a lot better than he's been in recent years for the Chargers. I fundamentally kind of reject some of those, though. I think that, their receiving core they're going to be depending upon a rookie and a guy that's always hurt. At the tight end position, it's Jack Doyle, who's fine. I mean, he could be a good number 2 tight end on a winning team, but I don't think he's a number 1 tight end on a winning team. And their defense, their biggest addition on defense was who? Xavier Rhodes? Okay, so when I look at Tennessee, I think, okay, they keep the same offensive coordinator who did terrific last year. They kept the same quarterback who, yes, of course he's going to regress. But if he regresses back to the path he was on before he tore his ACLs in Miami, he's still a good quarterback. Obviously, you have A.J. Brown. You have Corey Davis as a former top pick. And their defense was troubling last year, but it got better with the addition of Christian Fulton. I think that they should not be plus 175 or 165 is what they are now. Houston at plus 320, I do think that's a value, but it's a bridge too far.
What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to call. First, it's kind of oxymoron, this bold prediction sort of thing, because it's kind of like something you say are going to happen, but you don't necessarily think it's better than a 50-50 shot.
It's tricky for anyone that knows math to make bold predictions, but yes.
Right. So I'm going to say my main pushback with Eric here is that maybe he's sticking a little too hard to the prediction part, picking something that's 160. A little more boldness. I think may be good there.
I've been telling Eric that for a while.
I'm actually going to throw one out here as I'm looking at these division winners. How about the Los Angeles Rams at plus 550 to win the NFC West? Now, I mean, okay, this is bold. This goes into it's not going to be necessarily the case, but I'm feeling a little bit more confident with the potential regression of the 49ers. Mm-hmm. Defense obviously got them there. They literally do not have anyone to play wide receiver, I think, at this point. Last time I checked my notes.
I'm flying to California to try out.
So there's a few different things going wrong, and I'll just continue to doubt the Seahawks and doubt everything that they're doing there. One, so I can hopefully get in a Cable Thanos meme at someday by doubting them, and two, I just want to see not pain for the Seahawks fans, but just the fact that Carroll and that offense, they keep on pushing this running game, and I eventually want to see some negative consequences. Otherwise, why is anyone going to change from that? So for those two reasons, I'm thinking the Rams, who had got kind of unlucky, I'd say, in some games last year. Goff was a little bit off on his touchdown rate. I think a lot of those things can pump up this season for them. I
agree with you that if the Rams were the same team as the Rams were last year, this is 100% good. But there's a lot there, isn't there, as far as bad? Like, you lose Wade Phillips, you lose Eric Weddle, you lose Corey Littleton, you lose Nicole Roby-Coleman, Dante Fowler. Obviously, you get Ramsey, which is great, but like the defense...
They had Ramsey last year.
Right, exactly. I mean, and he's acclimated to the system, but the system changes. Their defense is a weak tie thing where it's completely dependent upon the coach in some regard. Like, I think their defense is going to be bad in a division where I think the Niners regress offensively, but Arizona gets better offensively. Seattle probably gets better offensively just because they can't get any worse as far as game script. And when I look over at that offense, like they didn't do a whole lot to increase the I think Van Jefferson, people think he's good, but I don't think he's worth the second-round pick. I'm not buying that so much. Mm-hmm. And they turned into an offense last year that couldn't function properly unless they got in good down and distances and they ran things like play action and boots and stuff like that. Like I just don't think Goff is anti-fragile enough to win this division. He could win the NFC North. I don't think he could win the NFC West.
It's interesting. We talked about the Rams a little bit yesterday, and I'm curious, Kevin. So you go, okay, kind of a bold prediction. What has to go right? Because to me, there's one thing that I think of where it's if this goes right, your bold prediction could be true, and that's kind of like what sort of a bold prediction you're looking for. It's like, okay, I don't want 10 things to go right, but like if this one thing goes right, they could get there. What's that for the Rams?
I mean, I think the thing that has to go right is the defense coming together. Now, I know you pointed out that they lost a bunch of pieces, but some of the way you're bringing Jalen Ramsey for a full season this time. Maybe if they can find some pieces to build around their blue chips in Ramsey and Donald, you get the right system. You allow maybe Ramsey to be on an island and build the rest of the pass defense around that. You have all of that working. Their defense, it's not out of the realm of possibility that it could be better this season, right? I mean, last year, they were 9-7 in the format that we have now. They would have made the playoffs. Maybe they would have won a wild card game.
Stop it.
We'd be thinking about them in a totally different way than we would be thinking about them now, even if they just made the playoffs. Because I think a lot of people don't even realize that they were that good this year. And I don't know. I think the offense has enough pieces, and that they can still get it done. So that's why I bring those two things together to say it's really the defensive side. If they can surprise, and we see surprises on the defensive side more than on the offensive side, and the offense can get a little bit closer, maybe not all the way back, but a little bit closer to what we saw in 2017 and 2018.
If they don't bust coverage on that last drive on 3rd and 16 to Emmanuel Sanders in Week 16, they probably win that game, and they're a 10-win team.
Here's my thing, though.
I just don't think they're good enough defensively, and I don't think that their quarterback is good enough to play.
Interesting. So I'm shocked that Kevin said that. I thought I was leading him right into, well, if the offensive line doesn't just suck completely last year, like Jared Goff was one of, I think he was actually the only quarterback. I might have to check this and amend later, but I believe he was the only quarterback last year who had a time to throw decrease by 0.2 of a second or more and a pressure rate increase. So and they didn't change what they did a whole ton. It wasn't like they ran quick game or anything like this. He had to get rid of the ball quicker and was under pressure more and is not exactly quarterback number one you want handling any sort of heat in any sense of the word, like none. He doesn't even know where the sun rises, right? So it's not a situation where I just think you can say, okay, Jared Goff's going to play better or can play better. It's like he really needs those people around him or else it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of teams that just need to play better just even to stay the same this year. And I think the Rams on offense are one of those teams. Okay,
here's my bold prediction. The AFC, I'm not willing to make a bold Super Bowl prediction because I just, in a year like this, having Patrick Mahomes is so important. But my bold prediction on the other side is that the NFC representative in the Super Bowl is going to be the Seattle Seahawks. And here is my reasoning. A little bit of it is karma.
Currently 10-1 on FanDuel, by the way.
Okay. And so, yes. So the public narrative is probably more popular.
We have it at 11%, so there's some value there. Okay. There you go.
But from an analytics perspective and the Twitter universe that we sit in, people will be like, you're a traitor because all we talk about is letting Russ cook and how Pete Carroll's love of running the ball on early downs is going to hurt them and how the Jamal Adams trade hurts, it's not a plus EV trade because of how valuable those picks are. Okay. That is all going to blow up in our face. They're going to be massively efficient running the football on first and second down.
Stop.
And we're going to have to wear it the entirety of the season. And and poor Ben Baldwin is going to he's going to get it. He's just going to absolutely get it. This is probably the worst thing that could happen to him. That's also the best thing that could happen to him, which is his team going to the Super Bowl and him having to get it along the way. But it's interesting. One of the reasons that I like this as a bold prediction is that I think what you said, Kevin, about the 49ers regressing, I feel more and more strongly about each and every day, not just with the injuries, but the defense. There's no way that defense is going to be as good as it was last year. And as much as I like Jimmy G as a flyer MVP, the door is open there for the Seahawks to win that division and go to the Super Bowl.
Currently plus 240. I think that's a 2%. I mean, there's a 2% edge there on that if you look at our simulations. I do like the thing about Seattle and Green Bay this year, sort of both the same thing. It's like their long-term outlooks are not positive EV. The trades, that Seahawks have made and the draft picks that the Packers have made, I think neither one is relevant to their current straits this year, which means that I think you're getting some value in buying them this year and fading them in the future.
Was that bold enough for you, Kevin? Maybe not.
Yeah. No, I think that was. I think that was bold enough. Okay, there's a couple interesting things with this. Number one, I want to give. It pains me to do so, but I do want to give credit to Seahawks Twitter because I watched the video. I don't know if you saw this the other day, but Pete Carroll. First of all, Russell Wilson was asked about cooking and whether he should be allowed to cook or not, and he said he was positive. So I asked Pete Carroll about it, and he, sarcastically said, "Oh, we're just going to pound the rock. We're going to pound the rock," and that's what got out there. So I was going to cancel Pete Carroll again. He's been canceled many times, but I was going to cancel him again for that. But then, if you listen to what he said after that, he did pause and say, yeah, we are thinking about, because you guys keep asking me about it. He's like, you guys keep asking me about it, and we are thinking about it. And then, it was a bunch of nonsense that and word salad that he threw in after that. But he did say he wanted to put him in the position. So I do think that, if anything, Seahawks Twitter may be bullying at least Pete Carroll into having to think about these things a little bit this year. So, maybe if they struggle, maybe the best thing that can happen for them is to struggle a little bit initially. Out the gate, and they say maybe we can let Russ cook. We're all in on this season, right? They are all in on this season with everything they've done. So maybe there's a chance that will actually happen. And if that happens, then I'll be I'll think about the Seahawks much more positively than I do now.
I think there's a chance with this Seahawks team because Tyler Lockett. One of the things that gets brushed over a lot is Tyler Lockett getting injured at the end of last season. He was running on one leg, but DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett both being healthy, Metcalf being a little bit better, that hopefully entices them to throw a little bit more. I feel like they've always thought, we just don't really have that many passing, options. Like, well, no, actually you have two great ones. Like, use them.
They get Will Dissly back, who was somewhat effective, and then Greg Olsen is like, as a number two, like, catch only tight end, I think is not a bad option either. Yeah. Plus earmuffs, everybody. Chris Carson's a pretty good running back.
No, but they have all these playmakers, and then on the defensive side of the ball, everyone talks about Quentin Dunbar's other issues. The dude was really good at football last year.
Same.
And Jamal Adams is awesome as well.
I mean, they might have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. If you're I would say the Earl Thomas move makes a lot of sense for them because Quandre Diggs played in the slot in Detroit, he could be a sub-package player. And it looks like Trey Flowers has improved. He would be the odd man out currently in the Dunbar, Shaq Griffin sweepstakes to play corner. They have Wagner and Wright at linebacker. Bruce Irvin can bring some heat, I think. But, they're going to struggle at pass rush, but we've all thought that, coverage matters a lot more. I think they're a pretty complete team. Now they got to get out of their own way. Like that's a huge deal. Like we're like the most stable thing is the Seahawks getting in their own way with respect to winning football games.
Exactly why they're going to ride it all the way to the Super Bowl this year. Kev, you mentioned the Rams. Was that your bold prediction, or did you have another one that you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, I was just kind of throwing that off the top of my head. Another one I thought about a little bit, and this was part of my discussion with JJ, and what we were doing in this discussion was I was consciously arguing it against all of his bold predictions.
Smart.
Just to see like the back and forth there and where we could get. So one of his bold predictions was that James Conner was going to outscore Nick Chubb this year in fantasy points. And he was going on the premise that Connor's more likely to get this 3-down back sort of role, and Kareem Hunt is going to be, getting into Chubb's workload and all that sort of stuff. But the more I started to look into it, I became a little bit more positive on Nick Chubb. So I'm going to say Nick Chubb is actually the fantasy number one running back this season. And the reason I'm saying this is because when I looked more into the Kareem Hunt thing, with Hunt and Chubb, Hunt was taking away some of the receptions, taking away some of their stuff, but they were playing together a lot, almost 70%. Actually, I think it was almost 80% of Hunt snaps. Nick Chubb was on the field at the same time. And if they're really going to bring in that Kubiak scheme that they were running, that Stefanski was running in Minnesota, Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook played 0 snaps together. Although they were played with 2 running backs a lot, it was entirely with the fullback. So I feel like there's probably less of a threat there in some ways than people think for Kareem Hunt out there. And if Nick Chubb gets rolling, shows he can do what he can do, he was one of the top guys in the league as far as his workload. I just feel like in this offense, in this scheme, everything else that where we saw Dalvin Cook jump up into being number 2, number 3 fantasy running back, if you look at it on a per game basis, I feel like that same thing can happen for Nick Chubb, because I think he's even more talented than Dalvin Cook is.
What we are both Kareem Hunt guys, and I've gone over.
I need to clarify this. Not a Kareem Hunt guy.
Yeah. But
not a Kareem Hunt guy at all. But
I like components of this though. Here, the Browns have a bottom 3 schedule in terms of difficulty. That leads to running the football.
Yes.
Nick Chubb is nominally their number 1 back.
Is not a piece of shit.
He's not.
As far as
the only issue I see with that. Because if I could correlate those to Nick Chubb getting a lot of opportunities, I think this makes a lot of sense. Last season, though, a huge fraction of Alexander Madison's carries came when the Vikings were ahead. Stefanski laid off of Cook when the games were decided. The Browns are in a very similar position as the Vikings last year. They got a talented defense. They have good a set of good tight ends, a set of good receivers. They have a quarterback who needs help. And they have a running back, two talented running backs, and they'll be ahead in a lot of games. I see a little bit and I agree with you, Kevin. I don't think they're going to play together. I think that was a ploy that was like a desperate ploy for Freddie Kitchens last year. My only issue is if they get ahead, and we don't see the explosive plays we saw from Chubb a season ago, the long runs, like the one against the Ravens, the one against New England. If we don't see those, and Chubb gets to 1,100 yards, a la Cook last year, we're going to see a ton of Kareem Hunt to close games. Does that worry you?
I mean, it worries me a little bit, but again, I looked at, Dalvin Cook only had, I think it was 50-something% of the carries for the Vikings last year. But when you took out after he was kind of injured, he had that shoulder injury at the end of the year. And if you take out when they were up by 2 scores, now that bumped way up into the mid 70s, so near the top of the league. So I agree there is the potential, but the Vikings had this weird thing last year where they had a lot of time being up by a lot of points. Where I agree it's a threat. Then when they're up by multiple scores, that's going to end up happening. But there were games last year where they were up by 2-3 touchdowns with more than a half to go, and it was nowhere even close. So I think there was just a very weird situation, and Madison got a lot more carries than will typically happen. Even a good team is not going to be up by that many points in a handful of games, and that's what really skewed it over towards Madison.
That's fair. I've bought a little bit of Chubb under that 1,300 yard range. I think I got a few of those, and our numbers have Chubb at about 1187, and I kind of like. I mean, we have him 4th behind Henry, Elliott, and Barkley in terms of rushing yards. But if he runs like the best running back in the league, which he has been, I think for for at least a year, that can certainly prop up. I just think usage is an issue. But if you're trying to win a fantasy league, you want a guy who you want your players to be both efficient, bell cows, for which the ceiling is high. And I think other than Derrick Henry, the running backs in the league, I think Chubb has the best 1,800 yard potential.
Right, because McCaffrey plays on like the worst team.
Yeah, the McCaffrey plays on a terrible team. Barkley plays on a terrible team. Elliott plays on a team.
Here, let me give you one. So
where McCarthy's never been the coach for a running back that's had his running backs were always very impressive 1,100-yard guys with a lot of catches, like because their offense was kind of balanced. Like I do think Chubb has the potential to win a league for sure.
And looking at James Conner, it's like, are we sure James Conner is good enough that the Steelers aren't going to have kind of a quick hook with him? And are the Steelers a team that throws the ball a ton? Yeah. A ton.
When Big Ben's in charge, they throw it so much.
That
they don't have good
slimmer,
backup running backs, though. That's the hard part with Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a second guy to go to.
They're all running backs, though.
Yeah.
Put in the right situation, it could work for them. I'll also point this out, which I think. So I've been on this a little bit, Kevin, which is Kareem Hunt, talent-wise, on the field, is actually really good, and that they'll just want to leverage him because he's another weapon. The other side of that is the only reason he was there was that that the previous regime had drafted him before, and it was like, oh, we're gonna bring this guy in again. There's a legit chance, maybe, perhaps, that this new regime is like, actually, this guy is not great. And as a some of the things he's done in the past, we probably shouldn't have signed him. And we're gonna phase him out of the offense.
What about the other way though? What about Kareem Hunt possibly being a better running back and them turning about?
That was my original hypothesis and why I was worried about Nick Chubb. But now I'm trying to consider the other side. I'm trying to be like Kevin. I'm trying to grow as a person.
Okay.
And consider that. So that would be the rationale that I would have there. But are you not concerned about that a little bit, Kevin, which is maybe Kareem Hunt's actually a better running back than Nick Chubb?
I mean, not as much when we're talking about just pure rushing the ball, but obviously he has that receiving ability. I mean, I think what I'd say about the bold predictions, and I think this is what made our the debate I had with JJ somewhat interesting, is this is not looking at it like a floor sort of thing. There is a lower floor normally for these guys. You're predicting to do these potentially bold things. So the thing with Hunt, it would be, I mean, you mentioned that he was brought in by John Dorsey, who had drafted him before. They got him very cheap. They were able to, extend him on this kind of like RFA type of deal. Mm-hmm. This is it for him there, though. I don't see any circumstance under which they bring him back next season. That doesn't mean that they won't run him a lot this season, of course, but he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. I don't see why you wouldn't just sit back and hope to maybe get a comp pick or something like that from him, unless they'd be so bold as to look to trade Nick Chubb, and I don't see that happening. So his time could be running out. He had another incident, I believe, when he was even with the Browns. It didn't end up being a big thing. So who knows what'll happen with him?
I'm stunned by that. Apparently, guy goes to Cleveland, gets in trouble once, you then bring him there permanently. And
look, it's another mistake on the lake.
Ohio too. That was part of the thing. That was part of the whole thing.
Mistake on the lake.
Anyways, running back news that just broke. David Montgomery left today's Bears practice on a cart. We'll know more when we talk.
Groin injury. It doesn't look as serious as previously.
Darn.
Look, the fact that running backs are even alive is just a testament to how God's grace.
I feel jilted by David Montgomery. I was such a big David Montgomery fan. I was looking forward to him being fun to watch.
It's not his fault that people compared him to like the god of all running backs in every.
Yeah, Walter. He's a combination of Walter Payton and Barry Sanders.
And Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
He was a Kareem Hunt guy, honestly. That was one of the big broken tackle sort of things. Yeah, it's amazing. I did some work on fantasy running backs at the beginning of the year, and I kind of liked Montgomery a little bit as a potential breakout candidate, and it was very surprising that most of course, Twitter replies are all trash. We all know that, but all the Twitter replies were, he sucks. He's not good. Like that's the reason that he cannot be the breakout running back this year, is because he's actually not a good running back. And when I see that, I really start to perk up and I say, okay, this guy probably is a great value, because I'll just fade any like talent-based discussion on someone like Montgomery, because everyone loved him coming out of college.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was at. All right, this was a lot of fun. Kevin Cole, you have not just the Unexpected Points podcast, but you're going to have some of the coolest DFS showdown content, not some of, the coolest showdown content coming out And the season it's right around the corner. It's August 26th. So that'll be here before you know it. Excited about both of those things. Have you decided on the exact date when you're releasing your pods?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be, it's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday, but it's going to be weekly during the middle of the week. I know it's kind of a logjam, at least in my podcast feed, around the Wednesday sort of thing. So I'm going to figure out whether or not it's better to delay it a day or so.
That's a you problem, I think.
I'm with Kevin. I feel Kevin's pain here. Like, there are certain like seasons of your life where you're like, God, there's just too much to listen to. And then there's certain other times where it's like, I'm riding my bike and there's nothing like good on. So Kevin, thank you for filling that void.
Well, a lot of these football podcasts, they go. I mean, our friend of the show, friend of the forecast, Robert May, has just announced today that he's starting a podcast. So now you still have the Ringer podcast, and now you have him with another podcast, which I believe they're doing 3 or 4 times a week.
Doing a lot.
So
Dude,
it's
unreal.
there's a lot of stuff out there.
What's been really fun about this show, and I know I've tweeted about this a number of times, is the fact that we've had guests during this like really tough time. When people. And what I thought was been really cool is the disagreements. Like, we just don't like it, it's you and I sort of like our opinions, George. They like tend to like converge,
yeah.
Except for on Bridgewater, and then
because all of our arguments happen on Slack, and then we come to consensus.
And then we just like it's like religion. Like, we just don't talk about Bridgewater on here, so it doesn't ever like come up. But then when we have people like, Kevin, your point of view is one I respect quite a bit. And then, obviously we had Ian and Evan yesterday, and just being able to like keep yourself honest, I think is going to be really important in a season like this where like there's so much uncertainty.
Yep. Which is why it's cool that Kevin is doing a interview podcast, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully I can get better at both analytics and learning about football, so I can make it on Kevin's podcast at some point. Kevin Cole, thanks for hanging out, man. Be well. Special thanks to Kevin from the Maryland area. I'm going there. He's already there. Maybe we'll hang out.
Yeah, that's right. You're leaving today.
Yeah, I'm going to visit. I checked the weather. Guess what? Hot and muggy.
Jeez. Any coronavirus on the plane?
God, help us all. Please be safe. Wear a mask. I'll tell you this about my flight, just a real quick story. You know how much I hate airports. I don't really like flying.
It's all of a sudden become rational.
Yeah.
The whole time I always just thought you were neurotic. But
yeah, you thought I hated germs, and now you're like, I get it. So I'm trying to book a flight out of Cincinnati, and there are just no nonstop flights. So I am taking a flight from Cincinnati to Charlotte. I'm staying at the Charlotte airport for an hour and 15 minutes, and then I'm taking a flight from Charlotte to DC. So this whole thing is like 4.5 hours. I want you to pray for me.
I always do, by the way. So
Thank you.
I'm going to up it a little bit.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a picture of where I end up at the Charlotte airport. It's going to be, I just have no idea what I'm going to do. Anyways, next week, God willing, we're going to have some fun guests as well as we continue to prep for the season. So make sure you want to check those out. Also, if you didn't listen to the last episode, we had Ian Hartitz and Evan Silva, and we had a great Josh Allen debate, plenty of other stuff. So check out all those, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace out.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.